Hey everyone. I've been lurking here for a while but never thought I'd be the one posting my own story. Yet here I am, typing this out because I need to get it off my chest and maybe find some support or advice. My name's Mike, and I'm 35. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Lisa, is 33. We've been married for 8 years, and until recently I thought we had a pretty solid relationship. But over the past few months things have taken a dark and unexpected turn. Lisa and I met through mutual friends back when we were both in our 20s. She was vibrant, full of life, and had this infectious energy that drew everyone towards her. We hit it off immediately, started dating, and within a couple of years, we got married. Life was good. We both had decent jobs, enjoyed traveling, and spent our weekends with friends and family. We decided early on that we didn't want kids, and that worked perfectly for us. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. About 6 months ago, I started noticing small changes in Lisa's behavior. At first, it was subtle. She began spending more time on her phone, often texting late into the night. She became more secretive, shielding her screen whenever I walked by. I tried not to think too much of it, chalking it up to her being more involved in social media or chatting with friends. But then she started going out more frequently, often with vague explanations about meeting up with old friends or attending work events. One night, she came home well past midnight, reeking of alcohol and wearing a dress that was way too revealing for a simple night out with friends. I confronted her, asking where she had been, but she brushed me off with some half-baked story about losing track of time. I wanted to believe her, so I let it slide. But that nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. A few weeks later, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I checked her phone. I know it's an invasion of privacy, but I was desperate for answers. What I found shattered my trust completely. There were dozens of messages between her and several different men. The conversations were explicit, talking about meeting up, and even discussing payments. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Lisa was sleeping with other men for money. I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and utter disbelief. This was the woman I had loved and trusted for years, and she was out there selling herself to strangers. I confronted her the next morning, phone in hand, demanding an explanation. She didn't deny it. Instead, she lashed out, accusing me of invading her privacy and claiming that I had no right to judge her. She said she needed the extra money because our finances were tight, but I knew that was a lie. We were comfortable financially. There was no need for her to do this. The confrontation turned into a shouting match, with both of us saying things we probably shouldn't have. She called me controlling and boring, and I called her a liar and a cheat. It was a mess. Eventually, she stormed out, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a marriage in shambles. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our conversations in my head, wondering where it all went wrong. I felt like a fool for not seeing the signs earlier, for trusting her blindly. The emotional pain was unbearable, but beneath it all, there was a sense of clarity. I knew I couldn't stay in this marriage any longer. The trust was gone, and without it, there was no foundation to build on. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I filed for divorce. I didn't tell Lisa right away, wanting to get everything in order first. I reached out to a lawyer, started gathering documents, and prepared myself for the inevitable battle. But as I did all this, a part of me still held on to the hope that she would come to her senses, apologize, and maybe we could work things out. Unfortunately, that never happened. When I finally told Lisa about the divorce, she didn't seem surprised. She didn't beg or plead or even show much emotion. It was as if she had already made peace with it. We agreed to part ways amicably, and she moved out the following week. It was a relief, but also a painful reminder of how far apart we had drifted. Now here I am, sitting in an empty apartment, trying to piece my life back together. I've lost my wife, my trust, and a big part of my identity. But I'm determined to move forward, to find some semblance of normalcy again. I'm sharing my story here because I know I'm not the only one who's been through something like this. If anyone has any advice or words of encouragement, I could really use them right now. After filing for divorce, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. I kept going to work, met up with friends, and tried to keep myself busy. But every night, When I came home to that empty apartment, the reality of what had happened hit me like a ton of bricks. I couldn't escape the memories of Lisa and the life we had built together. One particularly bad night, I decided to go through some old photo albums. I found pictures of us from our wedding day, vacations, and family gatherings. It was like looking at a different couple, a couple who was happy and in love. I wondered how we had gone from that to where we were now. The betrayal still felt fresh, like an open wound that refused to heal. I reached out to a few close friends and confided in them about what had happened. Most were shocked, having always seen us as the perfect couple. A few admitted that they had noticed changes in Lisa's behavior, but didn't want to interfere. Their support meant a lot, but it didn't make the pain any easier to bear. One evening, while going through some of Lisa's things that she had left behind, I found a journal. I know it's wrong to invade someone's privacy, but I couldn't help myself. I needed answers, something to help me understand why she had done what she did. As I flipped through the pages, I discovered entries dating back over a year, detailing her affairs and the men she had met. The journal was explicit, describing encounters in graphic detail and discussing the money she received. It was like reading a sordid novel, except this was my life, my wife. I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop reading. Each entry was a knife to the heart, confirming my worst fears and shattering any illusions I had left. One entry in particular stood out. It was from a few months ago and talked about a man named Derek. She wrote about how Derek was different, how he made her feel alive and wanted in a way she hadn't felt in years. She described their meetings, the gifts he gave her, and the excitement she felt. It was clear that Derek wasn't just another client. He was someone she had developed feelings for. I was livid. How could she fall for someone else while we were still married? How could she lie to my face and continue to live a double life? The anger and hurt were overwhelming, but beneath it all, there was a sense of clarity. This was no longer just about infidelity. It was about betrayal on a deeper level. With the journal in hand, I confronted Lisa. I asked her to meet me at a coffee shop, wanting to keep things civil and avoid another shouting match. When she arrived, I could see the tension in her eyes. She knew what was coming. I laid the journal on the table and watched as her face went pale. She didn't try to deny it this time. Instead, she just sat there, staring at the pages, tears welling up in her eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the pain she had caused, and my sympathy evaporated. "Why, Lisa?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do this?" She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, Mike. I was lost. I felt trapped in our marriage and needed an escape. It started as a way to make some extra money, but then I met Derek, and everything changed." Her words cut deep, but I needed to hear the truth. "Why didn't you talk to me? We could have worked through this together." She shook her head. "I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me like this. And by the time I realized how far I had fallen, it was too late. I couldn't stop." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of her confession hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. "I'm moving forward with the divorce. There's no coming back from this." Lisa nodded, wiping her tears. "I understand. I'm so sorry, Mike. I never meant to hurt you." But she had hurt me, more than I ever thought possible. As I left the coffee shop that day, I felt a mix of emotions: sadness, anger, and a strange sense of relief. The confrontation was over, and there was no going back. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and paperwork. Lisa and I communicated only through our lawyers, and I focused on moving forward. I changed the locks, got rid of her things, and started the process of healing. But the road ahead was long and filled with challenges. Every day I struggled with the reality of being alone. I missed the companionship, the familiarity, and the comfort of having someone to come home to. But I also knew that I deserved better, that I needed to find a way to rebuild my life and trust again. I've started seeing a therapist to help me work through my emotions and make sense of everything that's happened. It's been helpful, but I know it will take time. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time, trying to focus on the future and leave the past behind. After the confrontation with Lisa and the decision to move forward with the divorce, I thought things would get easier. But I was wrong. The emotional roller coaster had only just begun. Each day brought a new wave of feelings, sometimes anger, sometimes sadness, and sometimes a hollow numbness that I couldn't shake. I kept going to work, trying to immerse myself in projects and deadlines, but it was hard to concentrate. My mind kept wandering back to Lisa and our broken marriage. Colleagues noticed the change in me, but I didn't want to burden them with my problems. So I plastered on a smile and pretended everything was fine. Evenings were the hardest. Coming home to an empty apartment was a stark reminder of what I had lost. I tried to fill the void with hobbies, but nothing seemed to hold my interest for long. I started going for long walks around the neighborhood, hoping the fresh air and exercise would clear my mind. It helped a bit, but the loneliness was still there, gnawing at me. One night I decided to visit our favorite bar. It was a small, cozy place where Lisa and I used to go on date nights. I thought maybe being there would bring back some good memories and help me feel a bit better. But as soon as I walked in, the memories flooded back, and I felt like I was drowning. I found a seat at the bar and ordered a drink, trying to push the memories away. The bartender, an older guy named Joe, noticed my mood and struck up a conversation. He was one of those people who seemed to have a sixth sense for when someone needed to talk. "You look like you've had a rough day," Joe said, sliding my drink over. "You could say that," I replied, taking a sip. "Just going through some stuff." Joe nodded, giving me a sympathetic look. "Want to talk about it?" For some reason, I found myself opening up to him. I told him about the divorce, the betrayal, and how lost I felt. Joe listened quietly, occasionally nodding or offering a few words of advice. He didn't judge or offer empty platitudes, just listened. "You know," Joe said after I finished, "sometimes life throws you a curveball, but you can't let it keep you down. You gotta keep moving forward, even when it feels impossible." His words resonated with me. I knew he was right. I couldn't let this break me. I had to find a way to move on and rebuild my life, but knowing it and doing it were two different things. A few days later, I decided to start going to a support group for people going through divorce. It was a small group that met once a week at a community center. At first I was hesitant, worried about sharing my story with strangers. But I needed to talk to people who understood what I was going through. The first meeting was tough. Hearing others' stories brought back all the pain and anger. But it was also comforting to know I wasn't alone. We were all in different stages of the same journey, and there was a sense of camaraderie and support that I hadn't felt in a long time. One of the members, Sarah, shared a story that really hit home. She talked about how her husband had cheated on her and how she struggled to move on. But she also talked about finding strength within herself, rediscovering her passions, and eventually finding happiness again. Her story gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find my way through this. I started focusing more on myself, trying to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage. I picked up old hobbies I had neglected, like playing the guitar and painting. I even signed up for a few classes at a local community college, wanting to learn something new and meet new people. One day, while scrolling through my phone, I came across an old friend's contact info. Jenna and I had been close in college, but we had lost touch over the years. On a whim, I decided to give her a call. To my surprise, she picked up, and we ended up talking for hours. It was like no time had passed, and it felt good to reconnect with someone who knew me before all the chaos. Jenna and I started meeting up regularly, grabbing coffee or going for walks. She was a great listener, and it was a relief to talk to someone who wasn't involved in the drama of my current situation. She offered a fresh perspective and reminded me of the person I used to be, the person I wanted to find again. One evening, as we sat on a park bench watching the sunset, Jenna turned to me and said, "Mike, you're stronger than you think. I know this has been hell, but I can see you starting to come back to life. Just keep taking it one day at a time." Her words stuck with me. It was true. I was starting to feel like myself again, bit by bit. The pain was still there, but it was becoming more manageable. I realized that healing wasn't a straight path. It was a journey with ups and downs. And I was finally on that journey. I still had a long way to go, but I was beginning to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I knew there would be tough days ahead, but I also knew I had the strength to get through them. For now, that was enough. As the divorce proceedings progressed, things got messier. Lisa and I communicated only through our lawyers, which was both a blessing and a curse. It minimized direct confrontation, but it also made everything feel cold and impersonal. Each new document, each new demand, was another reminder of how far we'd fallen. One day I received a call from my lawyer, Beth. She sounded serious, more so than usual. "Mike, there's something you need to see," she said. "Can you come by the office today?" My heart raced as I drove to her office. I had no idea what to expect, but I knew it couldn't be good. When I arrived, Beth handed me a stack of papers. "These are financial statements and transaction records we obtained during the discovery process. I think you should take a look." As I went through the documents, my hands started to shake. There were thousands of dollars in unexplained expenses, lavish gifts, hotel stays, and cash withdrawals. It was clear that Lisa's affairs weren't just casual flings. She had been living a double life, spending our money on her clients and her new lifestyle. The worst part was discovering that she had opened several credit cards in my name without my knowledge. The debts were staggering. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about financial ruin. How could she do this to me? To us? Beth looked at me with sympathy. "Mike, we'll fight this, but it's going to be a tough battle. You need to be prepared for that." I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and helplessness. I don't understand how she could be so heartless. What happened to the woman I married? Beth sighed. "People change, sometimes in ways we can't predict. But you need to focus on protecting yourself now." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and endless paperwork. I had to dig deep into our finances, finding every bit of evidence to prove Lisa's deceit. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, but I knew I had no choice. One evening, while sorting through old bank statements, I found an old photo of Lisa and me from our honeymoon in Hawaii. We looked so happy, so in love. I felt a pang of sadness and nostalgia. How had we gone from that to this? I reached out to Jenna, needing someone to talk to. She was a rock, always ready to listen and offer support. We met up at a quiet cafe, and as I poured out my frustrations, she listened patiently, her eyes full of empathy. "I just don't understand, Jenna. How could she do this? Was our whole marriage a lie?" Jenna shook her head. "I don't think it was a lie, Mike. People change, and sometimes they make terrible decisions. But that doesn't mean the good times weren't real. You need to remember that." Her words were a small comfort. I knew she was right, but it was hard to reconcile the woman I had loved with the one who had betrayed me so completely. As the weeks went by, I focused on rebuilding my life. I moved to a smaller apartment, trying to start fresh. It was a small step, but it felt like progress. I continued attending the support group, finding solace in the stories of others who had been through similar ordeals. One night, after a particularly tough group session, I found myself talking to Sarah, the woman whose story had inspired me. She had been through her own hell and had come out the other side stronger. "You're doing great, Mike," she said. "It doesn't feel like it now, but every step you take is a step forward. Just keep going." Her words gave me strength. I realized that healing wasn't a straight path. It was a journey with ups and downs, and I was finally on that journey. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, I tried to focus on the future. I enrolled in more classes, started volunteering, and reconnected with old friends. Each new activity was a reminder that there was life beyond the pain, that I could find happiness again. One evening, Jenna invited me to a small get-together at her place. It was a casual gathering of friends, and I hesitated at first, worried about feeling out of place. But Jenna insisted, and I decided to give it a shot. The party was a breath of fresh air. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of normalcy. We laughed, shared stories, and for a few hours I forgot about the divorce and the betrayal. Jenna's friends were warm and welcoming, and I found myself enjoying their company. Later that night, as we sat on her porch, Jenna turned to me. "You know, Mike, you're stronger than you think. You've been through hell, but you're coming out the other side. Just keep taking it one day at a time." Her words stuck with me. I was starting to feel like myself again, bit by bit. The pain was still there, but it was becoming more manageable. I realized that healing wasn't a straight path. It was a journey with ups and downs. And I was finally on that journey. As the divorce proceedings moved forward, I found myself increasingly focused on uncovering the full extent of Lisa's betrayal. It wasn't just about financial protection anymore. It was about understanding the depth of her deceit. I needed to know exactly what I was up against, both for my sanity and to ensure I wasn't blindsided by any more surprises. One day I decided to hire a private investigator. I know it sounds drastic, but I needed answers. I needed to know if there were other secrets Lisa was hiding. The PI, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, assured me she would dig up everything there was to find. A week later, Karen handed me a folder filled with documents, photos, and notes. As I went through the contents, my heart sank. There were more affairs, more men, and even more lies. Lisa had been living a double life for much longer than I had realized. She had traveled to different cities, using business trips as cover for her escapades. The evidence was overwhelming and heartbreaking, but the most shocking revelation was about Derek. He wasn't just a client or a fling, he was her partner in crime. They had been running a scheme together, using Lisa's charm and connections to swindle money from unsuspecting men. The gifts, the lavish spending, it was all part of their con. I felt a mix of rage and disbelief. How could she stoop so low? And how could I have been so blind? Armed with this new information, I knew I had to confront Lisa again. This time, it wasn't just about the betrayal of our marriage. It was about the criminal activity she had been involved in. I arranged to meet her at a public place, hoping to keep things civil. When Lisa arrived, I could see the tension in her eyes. She knew something was up. I didn't waste any time. I laid out the evidence Karen had gathered and watched as her face went from pale to ashen. She didn't try to deny it this time. Instead, she just sat there, staring at the table. "Why, Lisa?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why did you do this? Was our whole marriage just a lie to you?" She looked up, tears welling in her eyes. "No, Mike, it wasn't a lie. I did love you. But things changed. I changed. I got caught up in something I couldn't control." Her words felt hollow, like empty excuses. "You could have stopped. You could have come to me, asked for help." She shook her head. "It wasn't that simple. Derek, he had a hold on me. I felt trapped, and I didn't know how to get out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You let yourself get involved in a scam, Lisa. You used our life, our marriage, as a cover. How could you?" She broke down, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Mike. I never wanted to hurt you. I lost my way." Watching her cry, I felt a mix of anger and pity. I wanted to believe her, to think that there was some part of the woman I had loved still in there. But the damage was done. There was no going back. "I'm going to the police, Lisa. You and Derek, you need to face the consequences of what you've done." She looked at me, a mixture of fear and resignation in her eyes. "I understand. I deserve it." The next few days were a blur of police interviews and legal consultations. I handed over all the evidence to the authorities and cooperated fully with their investigation. It was a painful process, but it was necessary. Lisa and Derek had to be held accountable for their actions. Throughout this ordeal, Jenna was a constant source of support. She stood by me, offering a shoulder to cry on and a listening ear. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, she invited me over for dinner. We talked for hours, sharing stories and memories. It was a welcome distraction from the chaos of my life. As the night wore on, Jenna gave me a long, heartfelt hug. "You're doing the right thing, Mike. It's hard, but you're strong. You'll get through this." Her words gave me strength. I knew she was right. I had to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it was. In the weeks that followed, the police investigation gathered momentum. Lisa and Derek were both arrested and charged with fraud and conspiracy. It was a relief to see justice being served, but it also brought a sense of finality. My marriage was truly over, and there was no going back. I focused on rebuilding my life piece by piece. I continued attending the support group, finding solace in the shared experiences of others. I threw myself into my hobbies and classes, rediscovering passions I had long neglected. And through it all, Jenna was there, a constant presence and a reminder that I wasn't alone. One evening, as Jenna and I sat by the lake watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "You know, Mike, you've come a long way. I'm proud of you." Her words warmed my heart. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever came my way. After Lisa and Derek were arrested, life started to settle into a new normal. The legal battles were still ongoing, but with the authorities involved, I could finally step back and focus on healing. I spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it all. The betrayal still hurt, but I was beginning to see it as a chapter that was closing. Jenna and I continued to grow closer. Our friendship had become a lifeline for me, and I realized how much I valued her presence in my life. She had been my rock through the darkest times, always there with a kind word or a listening ear. One evening after a long walk by the lake, I found myself opening up to her in a way I hadn't before. "Jenna, I don't know what I would have done without you," I said, looking into her eyes. "You've been amazing through all of this. I don't think I've properly thanked you." She smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. "You don't need to thank me, Mike. I'm just glad I could be here for you. You're stronger than you think, and you've come so far." Her words touched me deeply. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a future where I could be happy again, and maybe that future included Jenna. We continued to spend more time together, and slowly I began to feel something more than friendship growing between us. Despite the growing feelings between Jenna and me, I was cautious. My trust had been shattered, and I didn't want to rush into anything without being sure. We took things slow, allowing our relationship to develop naturally. We talked openly about our pasts, our fears, and our hopes for the future. One night, as we sat by the fireplace in Jenna's living room, she took my hand and looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "Mike, I want you to know that I'm here for you no matter what. I know you've been hurt, and I don't expect you to jump into anything, but I care about you deeply, and I'm willing to take this journey with you, one step at a time." Her words were a balm to my wounded heart. I realized that Jenna wasn't just a friend. She was someone I could trust, someone who understood my pain and was willing to help me heal. I squeezed her hand and nodded. "Thank you, Jenna. I care about you too, more than I can say. Let's take this one day at a time." Our relationship blossomed from there. We spent weekends exploring new places, trying new activities, and simply enjoying each other's company. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely happy. The scars from my past were still there, but they were beginning to fade, replaced by new, positive experiences. The divorce process dragged on, but eventually it was finalized. The day I signed the final papers, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a sense of relief, but also a lingering sadness for what could have been. Lisa had been a significant part of my life, and despite everything, letting go completely was hard. But with Jenna by my side, I found the strength to move forward. We celebrated the finalization of the divorce with a quiet dinner at my favorite restaurant. It felt like the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. Over dessert, Jenna raised her glass and said, "To new beginnings." "To new beginnings," I echoed, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was time to embrace the future and leave the past behind. As the months went by, Jenna and I grew even closer. Our relationship was built on trust, honesty, and mutual respect, everything that had been missing in my marriage with Lisa. We supported each other's goals and dreams, finding joy in the little things and strength in each other during the tough times. One sunny afternoon, while on a hike, I turned to Jenna and said, "You've brought so much light into my life. I never thought I could feel this way again, but you've shown me that it's possible." She smiled, her eyes filled with love. You deserve happiness, Mike, and I'm so glad we found each other. That day I realized that I was truly ready to let go of the past. Lisa's betrayal had left deep scars, but they were healing. With Jenna, I had found a partner who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide or what I could be manipulated into. It was a profound and liberating realization. Reflecting on my journey, I've learned a lot about myself and about life. Betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to define you. It's possible to rebuild, to find happiness again, and to trust once more. It takes time, patience, and the willingness to be vulnerable, but it's worth it. Looking back, I see how far I've come. The pain and betrayal that once seemed insurmountable are now just parts of my story, not the whole story. I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned, the strength I've found, and the love I've discovered with Jenna. Life has a way of surprising you, even when you're at your lowest. Hold on to hope, and keep moving forward. The future can be brighter than you ever imagined. Thanks for following my journey, everyone. Your support has been invaluable, and I hope my story can offer some comfort and guidance to those who need it. Here's to new beginnings and a brighter future for us all. The end.
Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions in the comments.